This stone was inspired by the Alien movies, so I want to kind of walk you through my thought process while creating this one, since it is such a very unique piece. For inspiration for this piece, they sent me a lot of photos of like the movie posters and the aliens themselves. So I really took a lot of time studying them and just pulling inspiration from those images. And one thing that you always notice is this iconic green color. It's on almost all of the movie posters. Usually the word aliens is written in it, or they have like the picture of the egg with this green color going around it and through it. And so I really wanted to bring that color into the stone. Also, the aliens themselves, they have like really long bone structures in their heads. So like the center of their head is very long, skinny, and tall. So I really wanted to bring in a lot of these long, skinny lines, which is what I'm doing here. I just started building out this section because I knew I wanted this to not be so much like a flower mandala, but more spikes and lines going through it. After I did that section, I had to figure out how I was going to fill in this space in the middle. And when you look at the alien's head, they have a lot of very strong bone structures that go off of the center of the head out to the sides. And you always have like a lot of like highlights and shadows kind of going in. So like these very prominent lines with like the shadow underneath and a prominent line. And so I really wanted to bring in that kind of pattern and idea into the stone. So I decided to go like with this silver. Their skin is this really cool silver metallic color, but it's very reflective of the environment around it. So I really wanted just to kind of play with like all of those ideas and to see what I could come up with. To represent the shadows, I ended up going with this black paint. I don't show a lot of me painting with this black paint because as you can see, you really can't see what I am doing. But with this black paint, I just took regular black paint and added like some iridescent medium to it. And then I added just like a little bit of silver just to kind of lighten it up and to give it a little bit more shine. And it ended up giving this really cool effect where you can kind of just see like the prominent lines with the shadow underneath. And the black paint is a different color from the stone itself. So once it starts to dry here, you can start seeing that some of that's starting to dry. It turns on more of the metallic color. It ended up really creating that effect that I was going for with the kind of having like the highlights and the shadows, like the bone structure of the skull of the aliens. So I really went with it on the stone, and that's became kind of the theme of the entire stone. I did want to bring in a lot more of the silver, so I decided to just go with these really big silver dots, knowing that I pretty sure that I'm going to go back and add like green top dots to them, and I might even do some silver top dots on top of the green. I hadn't really decided at this point. It was more of just an idea that I had going into it that I would probably end up doing something like that. But I just kind of wait and see how the piece progresses and kind of make decisions as I go. Next, I didn't really know what I was going to do right here, but I did want it to bring in some of the walking the dots. Almost all of my pieces have a lot of walking the dots. So I did want to kind of bring that in, kind of bringing my touch to the stone. And I decided to just start with the green, kind of highlighting this big silver dot. At this point, I was starting to get really excited about how the stone was turning out, but I also knew that I really was going to have to make a lot of decisions here coming up, that I wasn't really sure what I was going to end up doing because I didn't have a plan going into it. And I was just kind of letting the stone just decide what it wanted to be. And here I did decide to go back into this pattern of like the silver and the black to create that depth and those strong lines again in the piece, because I thought that kind of like tied these two little sections together since they are different from each other. But it's still the same idea, and it's still like those big long lines going all the way through the stone, which is something that I really loved about doing this one, because it really felt like the long, strong lines that I saw in a lot of the pictures of the aliens. And then here with the black, I ended up just doing big, long black swipes because you're not going to really see the dots. But then doing the silver dots going around it really helped define where that black paint had gone. And then I brought in these big, long swipes with the silver, just really pulling in that whole idea of the strong bone structure and the highlights. And it just kind of helps separates these little petals as well. So it ended up being a really fun element to add to this piece, and just kind of tying those two sections together more. And then once I got to this part, I actually had to set the stone down for a couple of days, because once I finished these swipes, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do next. So in the end, I decided that I wanted to bring some more of this green out, and I was going to do these big green dots. But then as a last minute change, I was like, but what if I make these like swipes, but very pointy and going off to the side? So it's kind of like it's wrapping around, because when you look at like the bone structure in the heads and stuff, you have these big strong lines going, and then they just kind of thin out towards the end once you get to the end of their skull. So I was kind of like, I wanted to bring that whole idea into the stone. And so I ended up doing it with these big green swipes. I absolutely fell in love with the idea of it, and I just kind of went from there with it. I was like, well, I really liked how I put the silver swipes down at the bottom to kind of define that petal. And then I was like, I should do that on this swipe part too, just kind of really separating this one section from the other and also creating more of those lines. And then once I did that, I was just like, well, I mean, obviously I have to go in with the black paint now and do like the shadow portion, and just kind of went with the whole theme of the entire stone of just doing this back and forth. And it just really ended up just bringing the whole piece all together. You have like all these different elements going on, and then in the end you still have this one common theme of these big strong lines with a lot of going back from the silver and the black to create these depth and highlights. And it to me felt very much like the photos and stuff that I had been seeing of the aliens, but just kind of using that inspiration in a mandala type form. So it ended up being a super fun piece for me. I really, really enjoyed this one. I always enjoy the pieces where I'm pulling inspiration from places where you wouldn't think of, like the Alien movies. And it's always really fun concept for me, and it's always pieces that I always enjoy painting. Next, I had to come up with the really hard decision of top dots, because I really liked it the way it was. And I was like, I don't know if I really want to do anything else to this piece. But in the end, I decided to try it, because I was like, worst case scenario, I can just wipe it off real quick if I don't like it. So I started with the silver dots and went with the big green dots like I had originally planned. And then it was like, well, do I add these little bitty silver dots to these little spikes? And in the end, I decided, yes, I do, because with the aliens and stuff, like, the bodies are mainly the silver, and then I like to having like the green around it, like it was reflecting the green from like maybe a nearby egg or something. So I kind of thought it just brought it all together. And then I was like, well, I'm obviously going to add some silver to these little spikes too, which was just a really, really nice touch. But then the only thing left was that center dot. Do I leave it? Do I put top dots on it? What do I do to that dot? In the end, I decided to just go for it, because I figured, worst case scenario, I'll just wipe it off. So I decided to go with the black first. And then I was like, okay, yeah, I like this, but what if I also put a silver dot on top of it? And for me, I just really loved the way it ended up looking. And that's how I came up with the design for this alien-inspired stone. Please let me know your thoughts on this video and if you would like to see more like it. Thank you.